10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Cricket8 Podcast. I'm one half of this episode of the Cricket8 Podcast. Mashal's him, Patrick Hewitt, and with me is the ever glorious Jared Kimber. Jared, how are you doing?
I'm very good. We finally got to the Super 8s.
We
That's all
did
I wait
indeed.
for in life is small victories and moving on, and that's where I am.
Listen, the sleep patterns for those of us who reside in the UK have been something to behold, and with the Super 8s insisting on many a 1:30 a.m. game for us in the UK, we aren't getting much sleep this week, but we have, as you said, Jared, kicked off with the Super 8s today. Literally maybe at the time of recording about a couple of hours ago, we saw the end of the first game in the second group between South Africa and the United States. Jared, I kind of had to quote unquote watch that on the way home, certainly the back end of that particular game in USA's chase. But here's where I want to start, Jared, and this is the question I think most people want answered. Are South Africa good?
That's a very good question. I thought you were going to say, are they going to choke? But I suppose they're related to each other, right? I've been getting increasingly frustrated. So I can't remember what they were after the power play, but Quinton de Kock hit like 20 runs off the fourth or the fifth over, or 30 runs or whatever it was. And I was like, great. They're finally going to play the way that I assumed they should have been playing all the way through, right? And they're going to go absolutely nuts. They're going to smash this associate team out, and that's the end of the game. And then, watching it, and you're like, well, they haven't lost many wickets, but, but they're still not going ahead. But, eventually Heinrich Klaassen will come in, and that will change things. Or Tristan Stubbs. And then they end up as 194 for 4. And you're just like, say what you want about Australia or England. Both of those teams would have scored 230, 240. They would have just ended the conversation. There is no way USA would have come back from that early start. Whereas South Africa just kept pissing about all the way through. And then you get to the end, right? And you get all the way through to the end of that game. And suddenly, USA is back in it again, despite the fact that most of their best batters are already out, right? Like, at no stage did South Africa ever either stop... It's either way. Either they were playing with their food, which I'm starting to believe they're not doing, or the opposite thing there is that they are just not in full flow at the moment, and they maybe don't even know what full flow is, because they could have ended that game like 3 or 4 different times. And essentially, Mash, they've won that game because of 2 players. Quinton de Kock at the start and Rabada's bowling. And Rabada's been bowling poor all tournament, so they'll take that. But those are the 2 guys that won them that game. Without those 2 guys, the USA would have won this game. There's not even a debate in my mind. That's how... And you look at the USA, they had so many little performances, and you look at South Africa and you're like, you just punch them in the face. That's what you do with associate teams. You punch them in the face. And South Africa just, like, they would toy with them for a moment and then let go. So do I think they're any good? I am going to say they could be, but they're not.
Interesting, right? So let me take it a bit further then. Let me expand on that. If you were in their backroom staff right now, having watched their 5 performances, are you heartened that they've won 5 from 5 without playing at their best? So, that kind of traditional sports person thing where they say, a good team wins ugly, and a good team is a team that finds a way to win even when they're not actually playing very well. Would you be heartened by that? Or would you be looking at the upcoming games against England and West Indies thinking, we're on the verge of getting found out soon if we don't buck up our ideas? And I'll even take it a bit further, Jared, to slightly confuse the issue. Maybe this is the sweet spot for South Africa. Normally they go into a tournament, people talk them up, they get to the final 4s, or they choke unexpectedly, etc. I feel like this is the first time I've seen a South African team in a long time where nobody really thinks they're that good, but they're just chugging along. Well, how do you assess that one?
Yeah, I think that's all very fair. I mean, if I was working for them, the 5 wins in a row is tricky, because it depends on the mood in the camp, right? Because if it's me, I would always say, I really just want us to lose a game so that everything that I've been saying privately can now be actioned. Right? That's kind of how I work. You never want to say that to the team, but that's kind of how I'm thinking. Because I know if we keep winning, even though I'm pointing out flaw after flaw, they're just going to be like, yeah, whatever, Poindexter. We're winning the game. Shut up, right? So if I'm with them at the moment, that's what I would be terrified of. The issue is, especially with their batting, I'm not sure how you fix the problem, which is that their batters all know that at number 7 is a giant praying mantis of a man, right? Like if you know that Marco Janssen is coming in at number 7, not that he can't do good things in the last 3 or 4 overs occasionally, but they don't want him in the 12th over, right? They don't want him in the 14th over. They certainly don't want him in the 8th or 9th over. And because of that, I think there is a conservative nature built into how they play. And as we know with South Africa, the minute they go conservative in World Cups, they seem to absolutely stuff it up. And the other thing that has been plaguing them in this World Cup so far, I don't think is as much analysis. Like, I don't know how you fix this, but they just haven't managed to get good performances out of more than 1 or 2 bowlers in any game. So Anrich Nortje, absolutely carries them throughout the start of the tournament, right? Shamsi wins 1 game for them. This game is largely Rabada. And you look at this game, Nortje goes for 9 runs and over. Shamsi goes for 12 runs and over. Like, they just can't match it all up. And Marco Janssen at the start of this game looked like he'd never seen a cricket ball before. It had been put in his hand against his will. And he was like, I don't know what to bowl. It's like, mate, you're just really tall and really fast. Just whack it into the wicket until you work out what you're doing, right? Like, this doesn't have to be complicated. Morne Morka did that for a whole career, right? I'm tall and fast. I'm just going to whack it into the wicket. We'll work out the details later. So those sorts of things I'm a bit confused at, that we haven't just seen a performance where all South African bowlers have been good at one time. That could just be form and luck, right? Which is fine. But then the other one is, I think there is a flaw in the way that they play. Because really, especially with Miller, Stubbs, and Heinrich Klaasen, you just want to let those guys fly their freak flags, right? Like, you want them to be able to score at 3 runs a ball. So in a game like this, you don't have to worry, you and I can bowl for them at that point. And so there's so many little issues there. But the other thing is, when you keep winning in a disappointing way, right? Which is, I think, what we're really saying. They're grinding out wins rather than, just cruising through any of these games. When you keep doing that, doesn't that affect the confidence of the players at a certain point where they're all like, shouldn't we be winning these games easier? And again, when we get to South Africa, that's the last thing you want, right? You want it from that point of view. But to flip that, and it'd be interesting to see what you think about this, because the other side of that is, generally by this point in a tournament, South Africa has probably had a couple of really brutal wins, right? Which means that they feel a little bit more confident. At the very least, they won't feel confident at this point, so they won't feel overconfident, which maybe occasionally is part of their problem. I don't know. But, we're playing, doctor psychologist to a team which has, inherited sadness, I think is the phrase I go with now. So I don't really know how to overcome any of that. But I would be very nervous if I was a South African fan or if I was working for them. You're right there.
Interesting. Obviously, for the USA, they're expected to be, quote unquote, the whipping boys of the group. They put up a creditable performance, and as you say, 2 players away from possibly winning that game and going into the West Indies game with even more confidence than they already had. I'm sure this won't be the first time, won't be the last time somebody asks you this question. But whatever goes on to happen for the United States and the rest of this Super 8s, what's the short-term and, I guess, long-term impact of their performance in this World Cup? Because I still find, as much as I want to get on the bandwagon and say, yeah, this could be the thing. This could be the thing that really invigorates the game in the country. I don't know if I draw an instant parallel between USA doing well in a T20 World Cup, USA Cricket as they are run as an organisation, and Major League Cricket as a normal separate entity in and of itself. So I don't quite know how to analyse the USA story in the wider context of a potential impact.
Yeah, I mean, if they win another game short term, America's going to tune in at a certain point, right? And I don't mean like 100 million people, but it's going to be on ESPN again, and it's going to be mentioned in newspapers and things like that, and on Twitter, and baseball Twitter will get excited again. So if they, and they didn't go that far away from, winning a game today, I think the England game's quite tricky for them. I think the West Indies game, because of the pitch and everything, might be the one that they they have their best chance at winning on. So they still have a chance of winning. So if they win, there might be another media storm / casual fan storm. There's certainly, from what I could tell, well, this has been happening for a long time, but this World Cup, there's a lot more casual USA followers of cricket than I've seen before. So something is happening, right? At what level of that is, I don't know, but something is happening. Long term, as you pointed out before, it's really hard to be a good cricket team if you don't have a functioning cricket board, right? Like it's, especially at the associate level. Why did Ireland leapfrog a lot of those other sides, right? It's because they had an independent board that tried to do things that would help Irish cricket, right? And, Scotland still doesn't have a board. I don't even know if Scotland has a board. I don't know if they've resigned again. I haven't checked the last 24 hours, but, Scotland have more players than Ireland and have a richer cricket history than Ireland. And yet we can't get a Scotland team at the same level as Ireland. So we know that administration really helps at that bottom level. Look at Kenya and Nepal, two countries that should both be test playing nations, probably with the the players that they have available to them, and the passion for the game in their area, but they've got cricket boards that don't work. So that's the longer term thing. I don't think it has to happen quickly though, right? Like, so if you look at football, and I'm not an expert on football or soccer, I suppose we should call it, for talking about the USA. But, if you look at it over a long period of time, you have kind of Pele going to play in the USA. Then you have the 1994 World Cup. Then eventually you have, football sort of starting to develop as it has the last couple of years. Where cricket is on that sort of doomsday clock of football, I don't know. But it does feel to me like it's going in the right direction, right? That it is at least moving forward. Would I have said that 10 years ago? Probably not. So if they manage to win a game here, that's all great. It's still, like, let's be honest, it's a Frankenstein's team. Like, they're playing brilliant cricket at the moment, and all credit to all the players. But we're not looking at this team going, well, in 5 years' time, what could they be? Like, in 5 years' time, Corey Anderson's going to be a coach, right? Like, if Aaron Jones does really, really good, is there not a possibility that he just gets picked up again and ends up, playing for someone else, like Hayden Walsh? What happened to Hayden Walsh Jr.? Like, you know what I mean? Like, all those sorts of things can still happen to them. And so it really is that next generation, and whether the kids 16 to 20 continue to play cricket, which hasn't always been the case in the USA. And I don't know if this tournament helps or not. But when it comes down to it, the college thing is the most important thing of Americans stop playing sport in college, right? As you and I know, you and I have covered this before when we're talking about about basketball in the West Indies. They stop playing sport in college. At the end of college, so they play in college, and they often, if they're a good athlete, they use their athleticism to get them a scholarship or to get them opportunities they wouldn't normally get. That's going to be an issue for all those guys who are coming through that next generation. Nothing that happens in this World Cup is going to, in the short term, nothing in this World Cup will change that. But maybe it will get a couple of colleges going, wait a minute, we've already got heaps of Indian and Bangladeshi and Pakistani students. And if we can help USA cricket, we can be like the home of USA cricket into the future. And all we need is like 3 other colleges to do the same as us. And we already know the whole Morrisville, North Carolina area has a lot of cricket. Those colleges could do it. So it is a possibility, I suppose. But that's the issue, is it's not like, oh, great, John Boy is on the commentary, so suddenly America is listening, right? Like, it needs so many more things rather than, the couple of wins they've had in this World Cup.
Indeed. So let's look ahead. Later, well, today, tomorrow, depending on your time zone. I'm going to call it the first of, people say obviously India versus Pakistan earlier in the tournament, but for the Super 8s, the first big heavyweight clash. It feels like a heavyweight clash. West Indies obviously
to you to actually call the West Indies a heavyweight team after the last couple of years. I hope you're catching shit from all the people.
I am. Do you know what? No, I am, Jared. Listen, if West Indies go on to actually win this World Cup, I'm gonna cop it from so many different angles. So, but at the same time, I want West Indies to win the World Cup. So, listen, they've done well under Sammy. Obviously, they're on the crest of a wave. Sammy is a great manager and motivator, and in a different way to South Africa. South Africa are riding some kind of wave, whereas West Indies are riding a genuine, what feels like an unstoppable wave. However, if there is any team in this World Cup that can go, or I feel, who can go toe for toe in terms of boundary hitting, whether fours or sixes, I do feel it's England. So I'll just put this question to you, read the game. Obviously, I'm biased. I want West Indies to win. But if England play to their potential, my feeling is that there's nothing West Indies can do to beat them.
I mean, that's probably right. I mean, I think West Indies have done well. I think we need to remember that they stole a game from New Zealand because of New Zealand's tactics and Shafeen Rutherford, right? The game against Afghanistan was a really good sign because we didn't know where to rank them, right? Like, we weren't sure which team was which. And we hadn't seen the West Indies on a really good batting surface. So it was good to see them do that. I still thought that it was a weird innings. Like, Puran makes a lot of runs at the front, and then there's a lot of runs in the death. So a little bit like the South Africa one today, you're just like, is this you at your best, or are you just handling the spinners? But yeah, I think if you're looking at ceilings, we can respect the West Indies batting lineup, but England just have so much firepower, person after person after person, right? That the ability to just go absolutely wacky crazy against you is what England have. Now, we haven't seen it in this World Cup yet, so. And until we see it against a proper attack, we don't know. I think that England is quite poor against spin. And I think that they have gotten away with it for a little while. And all my numbers suggest they are. Adam Zampa, I basically won a huge bet on the England-Australia game because I bet on England in the first 6 or 7 overs. The minute I saw Zampa with the ball, cashing out my bet straight away of just being like, I don't trust them against him. And I think he got a wicket first ball, right? Like, it was that dramatic in that particular game. Moti hasn't bowled well yet. I know the figures, but there will be a lot of people who will be upset at that. But like, I rate him so highly. I think he's bowled at 70% of his best. But Akil Hassan has been absolutely phenomenal, and they could throw some Rost and Chase.
It's weird, in fact, if I jump in, I'll just jump in there because the roles were reversed going into the World Cup. Everyone was worried about, is Akil Hussain going to turn up? He's actually turned up and then some. He's actually controlled the power play, which I think going into the World Cup, that's the phase of the game West Indies were really worried about. Can we control the power play? And then can we control the back end? But they've managed to control the power play so well in this World Cup that they've almost given themselves leeway later on in the innings with their bowling. And then obviously Multi comes into his own somewhere in the middle. I agree with you. I think England have issues with spin. I think there's potentially even an ego issue there. I don't know if you buy that, where because they back themselves, they almost don't agree with the idea of maybe seeing someone out and cashing in elsewhere. But you know what, Jared? I know I'm going to cop it, but I want you to cop it as well. It as well. Did you see West Indies? Well, the thing is, we've only played 4 games, so I don't even know how you can really rate it in that context. Yeah. But did you see West Indies being, quote unquote, this good, whatever that means?
I think coming in with they were about 25 to 30 to 1 to win the tournament before South Africa played against them. And I watched those games, and it wasn't at South Africa's full strength side, and I thought people got very excited in those particular games from that. And they came into like 8 to 1 or 7 to 1 off the back of that, right? Like, no team is shortened to win this title the way that West Indies have. And then you watch them in the World Cup, and let's all not forget that Papua New Guinea game was the kind of game that we've just slagged South Africa off for, right? Where you're just like, how are you allowing this team to keep putting you under pressure? Just smash a 6 and finish this game. And then you had the New Zealand game, which again was a game that they could have lost very, very easily. And because New Zealand was so bad, West Indies weren't qualified for Super 8s without being tested, right? We didn't have to see anything of them, really. I was impressed by the Afghanistan game. And, I know it's very dependent certainly on Puran at the front, but I was impressed that they had that kind of a batting performance in them against a really good bowling lineup. I know it was a good pitch and everything else, but against a good and varied bowling lineup. So I was happy with them from that. I still find it a stretch that they can win the title. I don't see it personally, how they can win it. But we probably, if we're going to be honest, we might know at the end of this game, so in a few hours' time, whether they can legitimately win this or not.
Yeah, I'd go along with that, and I'm even tempted to leave it there because that's funnily enough, that statement is probably why I called it a heavyweight clash, because I do think it's the type of game where whatever narrative people are building, you're gonna build it quite significantly coming out of this game. Either you're gonna say, right, England are back and they've shown their firepower, and this is why they're defending champs, or you're gonna say West Indies are the real deal. And they could actually win this World Cup. But certainly it's going to be a game that will have a lot of people glued to the edge of their seats. Now, Jared, let's close with this. I've been for those listening. Jared doesn't. So Jared.
I'm so happy with your little whatever this is.
Jared has no idea what I'm about to ask him next. So Jared, we are about coming up to halfway through, maybe just over halfway through in the tournament. And this is the question that's been plaguing me through the tournament. Is international cricket better than franchise cricket? And I am not, before people jump on us for this or jump on me, I'm not specifying I'm not specifying any one particular league. I just wonder. I've been really into this World Cup. Like, it's drawn me in. It's not even at an hour of the day that is conducive to my mind and health, right? But I'm into this World Cup, and it's just got me thinking: am I into it because international cricket just brings a level of significance that a franchise league can't match? And for me, obviously, that would be the equivalence of CPL, which is kind of our domestic league. Or is it because the quality of international cricket is better than franchise cricket? Or is it just more interesting? Or is it neither? So let me see where you're going to go.
You remember just before I started working for St. Lucia when they were really bad, right? Was it 2 years in a row where they basically...
where they came like... Right? Yeah.
And then not long after that, they made the final, right? And they came back. It was a cool little story within the CPL, right? But I think you would be hard-pressed to find a casual fan who would give a shit about that, right? Like, not in a bad way, but they'll be like, oh, well, eventually a franchise team's going to work it out, and they got rid of a bad owner and got other owners in, and that year they did okay. Whereas you watch USA play Pakistan, right? And I think if you know nothing about cricket, and you're not American and you're not Pakistani, it would be very hard not to get involved with every single moment of that game. And so international sport, and look, if you want the best example of this, it's like how many of your friends are experts in friggin' equestrian or hockey or shooting because an Olympics is on, right? Like they have no interest in any of these things overall. Like it's all nonsense. And suddenly, some English or Australian or Jamaican, person's doing well, and they're like, oh, I think he might get docked here for 3 points because the horse licked its lips as it jumped over the last thing, right? Like it is different, and I'm not a nationalistic person, so for me, I some of it is a little bit nonsensical and everything else, but the truth is that it is, and we're watching the Euros, right? Like if I don't know who the bad teams in the Euros are. Armenia, someone starting with A, but like a team that's not very good. If they overcome a really good team, we're all going to be like, wow, this is great. Yeah. What a story this is. And franchise sport struggles with that particular concept. And it's not that you can't have upsets in franchise sport. Like I think the Detroit Pistons went through a record losing amount of games in the NBA, and then beat someone. There was an excitement because they had lost so many games in a row, but it was almost more of a statistical excitement. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, can they lose it? Can they lose their 35th game or their 98th game or whatever? I can't remember what the run was, right? And then they stopped it, and everyone all of that went out of their brain. Whereas anyone who watched USA beat Pakistan, right, was naturally just like, oh my God, I'm going to remember that forever. That super over was crazy. There was no boundaries in the super over, and yet it went for all these runs, and Mohammad Rizwan couldn't stop a ball, and Mohammad Amir couldn't stop bowling bouncers. Like, wides, I should say. Like, I don't think you were going to forget those, and that's one game, right? We've seen other, even even the near upsets and everything else. And Ireland Canada was another one where I was just like, I can remember little details of that game all the way through. So that is why international sport doesn't die. And it's why even in sports that maybe it's not as big in. So like, you see baseball, right? Baseball's basically just a franchise sport. And the Olympics, and even at the Olympics, it's not taken that seriously. But occasionally there'll be an epic baseball game where something will go on and it will be talked about forever, right? And, I was talking about this the other day. When America beat Pakistan, I started casting the movie, right? Now, when the movie gets made, I don't know, the actors I all cast might be too old for their roles. But you and I both know that at some stage, some American production company is going to be like, we can make a movie about that. And that doesn't happen as much in franchise sport and the way that goes. Now, does that change when you've got 50 years of history or 80 years of history, right? Because Manchester United seem to get that kind of passion, right? And,
right, I was going to use that, yeah.
NFL teams is another one so I don't know. But what I do know is this, that there is something about international competition that matters. Also, we just came off an IPL where everyone hit a six every ball. And this is so vastly different. It almost feels like a different game. And it probably appeals to different kinds of people. If you just want to see the carnage of fours and sixes, then franchise cricket can probably give you that. Whereas World Cups is probably going to give you a lot more close games, a lot more grit and grind, a lot more moaning about pitches or everything else. But through that, we'll also get potential upsets and actual upsets and, all these little things that happen. And again, I don't know if a franchise cricket can quite get to that level in that way in cricket. Now, where, you and I are middle-aged men, maybe for 15-year-olds and 18-year-olds, none of this matters because franchise cricket has been their most important thing. But I just can't imagine if RCB win the IPL, I think it'll be a huge thing. But I don't think it's going to compare to like Sri Lanka winning the '96 World Cup.
Right. Yeah. And in time, like you say, this conversation may well be exhumed 50 years from now to say, what did they know? Look what it became. And maybe if we ever get something like a legitimate franchise Champions League type thing, maybe that gives it a bit more context because it almost adds a bit of an international flavour then.
We're actually, if you think about it, kind of in an early period of time when using the term nationalism, right? So, Australia was federated in 1901 or 1900. I should know that. It's one of those. Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. These are all new nations forged out of. I'm not saying that there isn't a rich tradition in those countries beforehand, right? But the actual nationalism part of them, calling yourself India and being that, is actually quite new. In 40 years' time, perhaps nationalism isn't as important, and maybe we move on to another ism and another ism after that, right? And so, I did this thing for TalkSport once where we talked to psychologists. I think it was a historian in psychology, and he was talking about the fact that what really happens is that sport takes over from war. So beforehand, all the heroes were like generals and soldiers and warriors and all these sorts of people. Sport takes over. Suddenly, we don't fight each other as much, so we do that in sport. We don't know how society is going to progress in the next 30 or 40 years anyway. And so franchises, which is a marketable concept that can continue, like sport isn't going to disappear. It may evolve, but it won't disappear. May just change anyway. So I think we have been in, maybe in the last 30 or 40 years, the height of nationalism, right? And so that was probably a really good time to have a sport that was completely based on national interests, right? How your team did was the most important thing. In the future, that may not be the most important thing anymore. Now, I think we've moved on from a cricket podcast here.
Listen, that's why I'm going to stop you. Listen, ladies and gents, that's been the first iteration of the Cricket8 podcast with me, Mashal St. Patrick Hewitt, alongside Jared Kimber. Make sure after this video, if you haven't already after this show, if you haven't already done so, like, share, subscribe, and most importantly of all, tell a friend to tell a friend, and then tune in the same time next week and this week, because there's more coming. This isn't the only one, people. This has been the Cricket8 Podcast. I've been Mashal St. Patrick Hewitt. Jared's been Jared. See you soon.